Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you. This is KRWG, TV, radio, online, news that matters. Next on Newsmakers, tackling the long-term water shortage in the Mesilla Valley. Plus, Living Here looks at the history of the Rio Grande Theatre in Las Cruces. And later, a conversation with the Dean of New Mexico State University's College of Education. Thanks for joining us on Newsmakers. I'm Fred Martino. Elephant Butte Dam was built in 1916 to store water flowing from northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. But more than 100 years later, with increasing temperatures and a growing number of users, water managers are working to address the same supply challenges the dam was built to resolve. Simon Thompson has our report.
The Elephant Butte Dam was one of the first big engineering projects out west. Before construction, the lower Rio Grande was a harsh and arid desert terrain that didn't allow for much farming.
But the farmers were really limited to how much they could grow because of the limited grow season and moisture available.
Jesse Higgins is the dam site manager. The construction of the 306-foot-tall Elephant Butte Dam turned the severe desert lands south of it into the most fruitful agricultural region in New Mexico.
When the government came in and said, we'll build this dam, that area they gave to the people. They said, as much land as you can clear. There's stories of families that had 6 or 7 boys in their family. Well, they could clear a bunch of land, and that's some of your big farmers down in Hatch Array, Old Mesilla, still to these days.
Higgins says when he was younger, he can remember the dam filled to the brim, at times looking like it was going to spill over the lip. Now the water levels rest below rings visible around the shore of the lake. Today, it's only 12% full. Phil King is a consultant with the Elephant Butte Irrigation District. It delivers water to as many as 7,000 farmers in New Mexico. King says the demand for water has surpassed the dam supply, and that supply is only diminishing with rising temperatures.
It's been just brutal year after year after year after year.
King says wetter conditions in the past allowed for agriculture that may not be sustainable today or into the future. A 2015 NASA climate study projects a harsher drought on the horizon that could last 30 years.
We developed an appetite for water during the 80s and 90s, which was this ridiculously wet period. So we've got, all this acreage of pecans and alfalfa, which consumes a lot of water. It depletes a lot of water from the local hydrologic system.
King says growing municipalities and industrial development in the lower Rio Grande Valley poses a challenge to the sustainability of farming in the region.
They're going to have to go somewhere for their water, and presumably that would be into the valley, where right now the surface water is used for agriculture. King
says he's working with economic developers to diversify the region's water sources. The irrigation district is testing the feasibility of a desalination plant that could supply water for industrial use in Santa Teresa.
So that does protect the supply for agriculture as well. That's why EBID is interested in it.
While that research, development and construction is likely to take more than 10 years, King says industrial users and municipalities are already tapping groundwater farmers use to irrigate when surface water allocations are lower. Elephant Butte Irrigation District recently launched DROP, the Depletion Reduction Offset Program, to mitigate the industrial and residential impact on the continued feasibility of farming. The program allows users to offset their water use and lease water from farmers.
There's not been a mechanism for them to be able to offset their impacts before. And basically what they would do is enter into contracts with EBID farmers to fallow agricultural land.
King says these go some way to mitigate the ongoing challenge of demand far exceeding water supplies in the southwest. But there are always challenges.
This is not the panacea for the problems down here. You naively think that if I can just get this problem solved, we won't have any more problems, but that just isn't the case. It's like every year springs a new crop. Every year springs new problems.
For KRWG, I'm Simon Thompson.
Time now for our weekly look at the issues that shape our community in focus.
Welcome to In Focus. I'm Anthony Moreno. The Diocese of Las Cruces has been asked by the Annunciation House of El Paso at the request of Immigration Customs Enforcement of the federal government to help with refugees who are in transition from federal custody to family life here in the U.S. Here to tell us more about Project Oak Tree with the Diocese of Las Cruces is Deacon David McNeill, Jr. Thank you so much for being with us, Deacon.
Glad to be with you.
Now, if you could start off by telling us a little bit about the history of Project Oak Tree.
Well, the name Project Oak Tree comes from the biblical story in Genesis where God and two angels are supposed to have appeared. I've forgotten the prophet's name at this point, but he took them in, put them under a tree in the shade, fed them, and offered them housing, but they went on their way. So this is kind of the same issue. We got a call from Bishop Seitz, Bishop Cantu of the Diocese of Las Cruces received a phone call from Bishop Seitz of El Paso saying that Annunciation House, which is an organization that houses refugees on a pretty regular basis, and about two and a half years ago there was a large surge and they were running out of places, and so they asked if we could help. So we put together this program, we called it Project Oak Tree, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, would transfer refugee families to us for housing and to help them make arrangements to get to whatever family members they already had in the United States legally. All of them have family members in the U.S. And so we would house them then at Finley Hall, which is part of the campus of the Immaculate Heart of Mary Cathedral. We had cots for them, meals, showers. We'd give them new clothing because many of them, the only clothes they have are what they wore up. And in those days, all of them were coming from Central America. And it was a long, arduous trip. I had one lady tell me that she hadn't seen the inside of a shower or a bathtub for 28 days.
Wow.
So, and they all had children with them. So these were people that were in pretty tough straits. They were all fleeing violence, gang violence, drug cartels, those kinds of things. And that lasted for about 6 weeks until the federal government decided it would move all of these folks into centers. The first one was in Artesia, and it was pretty tough place for those folks to be.
Was it more like a detention center?
It basically was. High wire, they had Border Patrol guards. The food they served them was not what they're used to eating. Many of them would just throw away the food because they couldn't take it. And they were waiting for hearings on their status, on their claim for asylum.
Just to stop you real quick,
okay.
Just to make a clarification, I mean, I'm sure there are many questions that folks have about the project, and this project is something that is simply facilitated by the diocese. It's not sponsored by the diocese.
Well, we facilitate the transportation of these folks. Once they are cleared by ICE, they have to be vetted first, make sure they don't have a criminal history. They make their claim for asylum with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and then they're given a date at which they will appear at a hearing. And during the time between their receipt and processing and that hearing, they stay with a family member who's already legally in the United States. And our function is to help them get that transportation to be with their family, to take care of them for the 24 to 48 hours that they're waiting for transportation.
Also, another thing I think it's important for our audience to understand is that these are refugees that are here legally in the United States.
That's correct. Somebody once asked me, well, how do they get here? Well, the answer is you can't mail a letter and say, I want refugee status. You have to come to that country. So when they cross the border, they turn themselves in. And then they're processed, and as I say, they're vetted. Once their claim is shown to be sufficient to warrant a hearing, that's when ICE will transport them up to us or to Annunciation House in El Paso.
Now, you had mentioned before when this program first began and the diocese was involved, is the refugees were in a center, like a detention center.
Right. Well, they would be held in Customs and Border Patrol detention centers, which were in deplorable shape. They would be sleeping on concrete floors with no covers or blankets. sometimes they get a blanket or so.
And you saw this? You visited
I've
these
seen
facilities?
the pictures of those. I did visit the facility in Artesia after they stopped sending them to us, and it was very, very upsetting. At any rate, we got a call again last September, October, that they wanted to start this program up again as we had done it before. This time, instead of housing them in one facility until they could get transportation, we switched the program so we have what we call host families that will take them into their homes and assist them in getting transportation, and that works by contacting the host family that they're going to be living with until they have their hearing. And so we call that family, we make arrangements for them to pay for the transportation. Usually they either send us a ticket or a credit card number. And then during that time, the host family will house them, feed them, get them clothing. We have several cooperating agencies like the Salvation Army will give them clothing if they need it. If they need medical care, very few of them do, but the common issue there is respiratory illness and dehydration from the trip up from Central America. And so they can get that for free, and then once the arrangements for transportation have been made, the host family here will transport them either to the bus station or to the airport in El Paso and make sure they get on the plane so that they're taken care of.
So how's the response been from the community here in Las Cruces in regards to hosting refugees?
This community is very generous. They have contributed. In fact, when we first started this a couple of years ago, we had more clothing than we could actually give away. We now have about 12 host families. Not all of them come from the Catholic churches. In fact, we have at least one volunteer from Temple Bethel. Other churches also offer volunteers. So right now we have 12 host families. That number is slowly growing. And the turnaround time for these folks, once they get into our places, is about 24 hours. Some take up to 48, depending on how fast that host, the family that they belong to, can get us the transportation arrangements.
So do you have any idea of how many people this program has helped?
In this, 2 years ago, it was about 180 in the 6 weeks. Now,
in 6 weeks,
yeah,
180
about
people.
Right.
Okay.
And that's families and or parents and children. In those days, most of the parents were women, or there might be an aunt or a grandmother, and they'd have anywhere from 1 to 5 children with them. Now we're finding that as of this morning, we've taken care of 122 families, which is composed of 283 people. So the host families, as I say, it's a short stay. So usually we receive the refugees sometime on Tuesday, and then they're usually gone on the airplane or on the bus by Thursday.
Now, I imagine there's a lot of rules that are in place for the families. I mean,
right.
in regards to contact, keeping in contact, and things like that.
Yeah, all of the host families have to register with us and go through training. They also have to have a criminal background check for anybody over the age of 18, and they have to take a course on what we call safe environment, which means how you don't pick on the kids or any of those kinds of things. The families are responsible for their own children. They have to be with them all the time. And so the other rules are we don't allow photographs, we don't allow records of names and so on, because most of the people coming up here are seeking asylum from gang violence or from drug cartels. And they have family back in their home country, so if those names get out, then those folks are in danger. So we're pretty tight on those kinds of things. Other than that, it's basically just welcoming the refugees into the home, providing them with food, companionship, and so on. So one of the things that's very helpful for our host families is that they speak Spanish. But that's not required, and sometimes it's not even necessary. We have a couple of refugees who have spoken English, and we also have some that don't speak Spanish either. They speak their native tongue in whatever tribe they were from in their home country, and they don't speak Spanish or English, and so then you resort to sign language.
I see. Interesting. I imagine there's a lot of different types of communication going on to really facilitate this whole process. We have less than a minute left, just probably about 30 seconds, but I'm just curious, in your opinion, do you feel that refugees bring value to the United States?
I do. I've met a number of them, spoken to them. They are all people who need help. I mean, their status in their own countries is really deplorable. And I think they are anxious to come to this country and do good. They want to get jobs, they want to work. They're not looking for free handouts, but they are trying to get away from some pretty deplorable situations.
I see. Well, Deacon McNeill, thank you so much for joining us and
Thank
sharing
you.
with us about Project Oak Tree.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
And we want to thank you for joining us for In Focus. I'm Anthony Moreno.
Well, the Rio Grande Theatre is the last operating two-story adobe theater in the country, and it's on the National Register of Historic Places. It's been given several other distinctions. The other thing that's important, and I don't know that you can see around the interior of the building here, is when we were doing the renovation, we uncovered these beautiful murals downstairs, and they are actually the crests of the first families of New Mexico. The theater went out of operation in the early 1930s when the building actually burned down, or most of it burned down, and it had to be renovated. And then again in 1998, it stopped running movies and it became dormant, and at that time it became the property of the Doña Ana Arts Council, and we were the people who raised the money to renovate it.
That's when they were starting to renovate the Rio Grande, and I thought that was awesome that they would be doing it. I had never seen it as I grew up as a child, and then to see the interior, all that, the beautiful work that is on all around the stage, and to be able to keep up the traditions of the Rio Grande Theatre and to maintain a beautiful structure. That was what was the most memorable part, and really appreciate the Rio Grande Theatre.
My in-laws' family holds a production around Christmas time called Los Pastores, and we were able to hold it in the Rio Grande Theatre now, and just to see the renovations that were done and it brings back great memories.
I see the theater now and I think about it every time I walk in there, about the difference the theater is now than I remember it then. Good times in Cruces, good times at the Rio Grande.
The heyday was during the 50s and 60s when the kids would go up and down May Street. This was the first run movies. It was the only place in town that really had the best movies, the best food in terms of the theater food, and that's what people speak really fondly of.
I can smell the popcorn, I can see Elvis. That's what we nicknamed him, the concession manager that was there. He had big old pork chop sideburns, and we called him Elvis.
The Rio Grande was, you know, the lights and the smell of the popcorn cooking, baking, whatever they do, popping, and the candies, the licorice, and anyway, it was a memorable day for us.
This is really a community center. We call it a performing arts center, and it's used for dance, music, theater, movies, but for the most part it is a multi-purpose venue for local groups. And so even though the theater only seats 426 people, it is still beloved by so many people. People have so many fond memories. They come and tell us stories about working here or having their first date here, that kind of thing, bringing their families here.
So many very good, vivid memories as a young man, walking all the way from campus to go see several different movies when that was the only show in town. I am currently with a woman who we went on our first date together in 1982. We went and saw a movie. It just makes me get all googly inside.
My granny Bloxham lived on 3rd Street, That's quite a distance from the Rio Grande, but on Saturdays I'd stay overnight with Granny. Cousin B and I would walk to the Rio Grande Theatre. We happened to have my nephew with us, and he's 10 years younger than us, so he was quite the little fellow when we walked to the Rio Grande Theatre. It was a Disney program. I don't remember the program itself. He had never been to a movie before like that. He was in awe. His eyes were deers in the headlight kind of thing, and my cousin and I wound up watching him more than the movie because he was in awe of that Rio Grande Theatre.
So as far as the future, I just think it continues to be that place that is the home to many community groups and the place where we can bring in top quality artists to give Las Cruces the best entertainment that they can have.
My name is Robert Williams, and I'm a board member with Southern New Mexico Pride. I came out 2 years ago, and when I came out, I was looking for the community. I was looking for people. I knew that there would be a Pride event coming up in June, so I just kind of kept an eye out for it. And then when I found out at that time it was Pride in the Park, they were looking for volunteers. I called them up and said, "What can I do to help?" And then got involved and started from there, and they asked me a few months later if I'd be willing to serve on the board, and I've been there ever since. So. As a nonprofit, we're able to get a free booth at the farmers market once a month, so we've been taking advantage of that and actually setting up a table every month just to give out information about us. So we're trying to become a resource as much as possible for people in the LGBT community, as well as those that have family or friends who may be LGBTQ that they want to support. Well, we hope that they take away more tolerance and understanding of who we are and who the LGBT community is. You know, we're not, out to get anyone. We're not out, trying to change people or anything like that. We just want to be ourselves and love the people we love, and we just want people to understand that that's, we're not any different than anyone else. Our board meetings are always the second Tuesday of the month, and we've been meeting now at the Bistro downtown, usually about 6:30 on that second Tuesday. The board meetings are open to anyone. We invite people to come. They have ideas or would like to get involved and help and stuff like that. We'd love to have them come and talk to us and stuff. So talk to us at the farmers market when we're there. So we get quite a few people coming up and asking questions and looking for help and stuff, and we try to do what we can. So the best way to do it is through Facebook. If you're on Facebook, to follow us on Facebook and like our page. We post everything there, usually first before it goes anywhere else. Our webpage, we've been working at keeping it more up to date. Find out when we have things happening, and then just come out and join us and have fun.
Finally this week in education news, addressing the teacher shortage and much more. Our friends at New Mexico State University's Aggie Vision recently spoke with NMSU College of Education Dean Donald Pope Davis. Here's KRWG General Manager Glenn Cerny.
We have the opportunity to move over to O'Donnell Hall, the Education College building, and it's a wonderful facility that was remodeled about 8 years ago, and also have the pleasure of talking to, now I'm going to say this on the introduction, Donald Pope Davis, but I know once before you told me only my mother calls me Donald.
That's right.
let's talk a little bit. As a fellow Midwesterner, I'd had a strange path to find myself in Las Cruces. Can you talk a little bit about your trail that finally led you to New Mexico State University?
Sure. So my interest in bringing and coming to New Mexico State University, and particularly the College of Education, is I was at a point in my career where I wanted to be at a place that I wanted to have some kind of impact and make a difference. And as I looked at the landscape and discovered the possibilities, New Mexico State University emerged as that possibility.
I can't think of another college on campus where it's as easy to connect the dots between the degree you get in the College of Education and impacting every community.
I would agree. So if you look at colleges of education historically, one of the models that it's functioned is it has this symbiotic relationship between communities in ways that other colleges don't. What I mean by that is if you focus, for example, on teacher education, for example, you are training students to impact the communities that are surrounding the university. You are training teachers to impact the lives of children, the next generation of students, in ways that other colleges don't do that.
What would you say to a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old? Why should they come to New Mexico State University for a degree in education?
So one of the things I'd say to a 17-year-old is that there's a shortage of teachers in the state of New Mexico. There's a shortage of teachers nationally, and the opportunities to find a job as a result of your experience here provides them with a career path if they're looking for a job. Nationally and locally, I get calls just about every month. Do you have students that can fill these particular needs?
If a student wanted more information on getting admitted to the College of Education at NMSU, how should they go about getting that?
So I would encourage them to do two things. One is to send an email to education@nmsu.edu, or they give us a phone call at 575-646-5858. And we will be happy to respond to any needs or any requests or considerations that they may have.
Final question, and I'll give you the choice on this one. Short-term, long-term goals for you as you approach your job here at the Education College.
And so in the short term, I want to encourage and develop a collaborative model in everything that we do, recognizing that by necessity will require change in terms of the status quo, because I think if we're going to continue to be relevant, we have to change. And so in the short term, I want to set up a process of engaging conversation with our state representatives, with our faculty, with our students, with our alums, about how do we transform the College of Education in the 21st century.
Don Pope Davis, you've got a lot on your plate, obviously. Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
taking the time to chat with us
today,
and best of luck with it. For Newsmakers, I'm Glenn Cerny.
That's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's Morning Edition, 5 to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now, noon to 2, and All Things Considered, 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we'd love to hear from you. Email us with your story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.